Hello and welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports for another race recap. Keep in mind that these are not the type of races that most people are familiar with. These are underground type races. Most of the stuff that we do as in myself and my other Rev people. We do a lot of endurance events that are under the radar and not well known and not very, there's not a huge participation of them. Gravel's gone completely bananas and you've got all these events, but even gravel used to be an event I used to do when it was under the radar and no one really knew what it was about. Now it's, So when I say race, you can also put in there event and realize that usually the top 10% of the people at any event, they're going to race it. It's just the way it is, right? Okay, so what we're going to do is just talk about the 300K that I just did with Barbara and Lori, and so I'll go through some little chapters. I need to at some point put those in, but I just haven't done it yet. So follow along, and hopefully I'll keep your interest throughout. So couple of things, or not a couple, more than a couple, but results, prep, the route, bike/equipment, clothing, nutrition, the things that worked and the things that worked but could be better, right? So I will begin with just the headline because, let's just get, for the curious and short attention span people, let's just get this out. A 300K Brevet is about 187 miles. This was a very, very flat event living here in Southern California. It was down in Borrego Springs, down in our desert. So 187 miles, only 2,600 feet of climbing. By comparison, the ride I did yesterday with my crew was about 2,800 feet in 13 miles. So, that's just what you have here. So this was down in the desert. 187 with 226.25 of climbing. Ride time was 9:48. Total time was 11:16. The spectrum of rider finishing times was the first finisher at 9:40, the last finisher at 19 hours, and there were 4 DNFs. 1 did not start. DNF did not finish. So that's the headline, right? And then Barbara, Lori, and myself, we finished riders 7, 8, 9 with the same time of 11:16. Okay, let's get a little deeper into the results now that you've had your curiosity quenched, or however you would say that. Okay, so the first group of riders, I'm going to group them in hour increments just to give you a feel for how people were finishing. So sub 10 hours, there were 3 finishers. Sub 11 hours, and we're just doing the block of sub 10 and then from 11 to 10 hours, right? So when I say sub 11, it's just basically that 1 hour between 11 and 10 hours. So there were 2. And then in the sub 12 hour, there were 12 finishers. So if you were to graph this out, it basically, you have your outlier here. You have the huge bell curve here of the 12 finishers. And then it starts to kind of descend this way, and then you'll have your outliers out here. So 3 at sub 10, 2 at sub 11, 12 at sub 12, And there was actually 2 data points there. One was 11 hours exactly, and one was 11:59 hours exactly. And then there were 4 at sub 13, 6 at sub 14, and so on and so on. Now, let's talk about the prep. If you've been watching the channel, I've made some posts about some of the training rides I've been doing. But the best thing to do is follow me on Strava, and then you'll see what I'm doing either on a daily basis or maybe just on a weekly basis. Just kind of check in with me and see what's going on. In the 3 weeks and the 3 Saturdays leading up to this event, I was taking the crew on longer endurance or long endurance rides, but then shortening the distance and increasing the intensity. So, for example, about 4 weeks before the event, we did a 150 miler. And the goal was to go the best as possible, a no ride. So no stops for no reason. There's a hashtag you can follow on social media. You'll find my rides. So they are hashtag no rides. And basically, these are no stops for no reason. And the key to endurance riding, well, there's multiple keys, but one of the keys is to keep the pedals turning, keep the wheels rolling. The time off the bike, you never, ever get back. Doesn't matter how fast you ride. And oh, by the way, if you ride that fast and you stop, it's time off the bike. There's a saying, and I don't know where it came from, if I was on the bike side or from the ultra running side or something, but there's a saying, and it goes, beware the chair. Beware of the chair. In other words, if you pull into an aid station, rest stop, that term is terrible. An aid station, a sag stop, you are in and you are out. You are not sitting down. Beware of the chair. If you sit in that chair, that stop's going to get long. And it's going to be hard for you to get back on a bike. So if I'm to give you any tip for endurance riding today, it is do not sit down when you get to an aid station. Do not. Everything in your body wants you to sit down. Don't sit down. Get your stuff. Get back on a bike. Even if you're pedaling slower, riding slower and soft pedaling, you are getting forward on the course. And you're not going to finish by sitting in that chair. Right? Every minute that you spend sitting in that chair. Get on the bike. Even if you soft pedal, keep the wheels rolling, keep the pedals turning. So we did a 150-mile ride, which I did as a no ride. Jess did 128 miles that day, and there'll be an update on Jess's condition in a different video. And then Barbara did have to stop. But 150 miles, about 8 hours on 2 water bottles, 2 fuel bottles and pocket fuel. And this was important because you'll see later in this video. The following week we did 125. Now the courses were fairly flat for San Diego. So each one of these had about 5,000 feet of climbing, a little over or close to 6, but it's hard to get away from climbing in this area, and I chose kind of the flattest route. Then the following week, I had devised a 50-mile loop, and I do a thing called rev laps, and usually it's shorter loops, but this time it was a 50-mile loop, and we did 2 laps of that loop. The first lap at around kind of a zone 2, and then second lap at zone 3. So 150 mile, then the next Saturday, 125 miler. And then the following Saturday, 1 loop at zone 2 and the second loop at zone 3 with intensity. And so we kind of tapered down, but the intensity kept coming up. And then we did this event. Now I think the training went excellent. My body was physically ready, and so was my mind I was up for this challenge. So that is the prep. So let's get on with the course. Just talk a little bit more about the course. It's desert riding. I mentioned it before. It's a very flat course. Sorry, my computer went to sleep mode, and I think I may reference it in a minute. So desert riding, and here in this area, that's you have to know three things, and that is, if you ride in the desert, there's always the possibility of heat, cold, or wind. It's just the way it is. So if you're heading out to a desert type event and it doesn't have much elevation, guess what? You're going to have one of those other three. You can still have elevation depending on which part of the desert you're riding in. When you exit the desert, at some point, you got to climb. And the climbs are long. 20 milers, 15 milers. When I was in Death Valley, at 25 milers. So, you have to expect all this. Anyway, so let's talk about the course. It was basically a counterclockwise course, and it went from Borrego Springs, dropped down, and then kind of looped like this. Early morning start, a 6 a.m. start, so it was kind of light winds, and then just a long gradual descent, like barely 1%. It actually a lot less, and it went on for 10 miles maybe or more, just a little roller, but generally down. But it's imperceptible because it was just over so many miles that you didn't ever feel like you were actually descending, but our speeds were fairly high. Then you came down south, and as you started going north, there was a section that was, and oh, by the way, I used that Epic Ride Weather. There's an app I talked about earlier, and it shows the wind direction based on when you are riding, what to expect for wind direction. And it was right on. It was definitely on. When we headed north, it was about an 80-mile light tailwind. And then when we headed west in the afternoon, I looked at the almanac for Borrego Springs, and it was 20 mile per hour steady winds. So it's no wonder we suffered. So the last 28 miles took us 2 hours and 28 minutes. And that's no exaggeration. And in the following video, when I look at the power analysis and I show that stuff to you, it was just insane how it was unrelenting. But it is what it is. It's the desert, right? Okay. Bike equipment. I shot a video where I showed the wheels I was riding, the bike I was riding, the wheels I was riding, and then how I was going to get large bottles, or I thought about the large bottles. In the end, I did use the large bottles, and that is a very important thing when I go into nutrition, where I taped the reflective stuff, the bag I was carrying, the lights I was using, that kind of stuff. So there is a video. I'll link that down below. I used the 60 millimeter deep wheels from Head. Head is one of my favorite wheel companies. I just got off the phone with Annie Head today, and we had a very good conversation, and I've got some wheels in, and the repair and everything else, very, very fair outcome that we will have. And so Head continues to get my business. The 60 millimeter Head RC6, and this is a rim brake wheel with a textured brake track and a carbon fairing. So it's not It's not a carbon wheel. It's not a carbon clincher. You have an aluminum brake track, and it's wonderful. But one thing that I think most people miss the boat on, this rim with a carbon fairing on it, even though the fairing is a 60 millimeter fairing, the spoke is still as long as it would be for a low profile wheel. So you get all this comfort out of the wheel because you have a nice long spoke. You don't have a stiff, short spoke like this. And that's why I love riding these wheels. They're aero. They are a rim brake. They are a textured aluminum track, not carbon clinchers, because you know carbon clincher wheels suck for braking, and they are horrible, if not downright dangerous in the wet. Do not ride carbon clincher wheels. It's just not smart. They're not safe. They should have never, ever been made. Okay? Carbon clincher wheels. Do not ride them. All right. I went tubeless again. And there's more on that in a minute. And then, let me see what I wrote here, because it's a little bit of a scribble scratch. Yeah. So the start of the event was at 6 a.m. with the sunrise at 6:34, and I was like, why are we starting at 6 a.m.? Let's just start at 6:34, because the people that are early finishers, which, we go back here to, 12, out of 51 starters, 16, at least 20 would finish before sunset. But so now you carry all your stuff the rest of the day, and then you finish before sunset. But we got close to sunset because of that headwind. Maybe that was some forethought by the organizer. And then I don't remember what this little scratch is. Chicken scratch is. Okay, clothing. This was all about aerodynamics. Some people asked me why I wasn't riding my Ritchie. My Ritchie's a beautiful, comfortable bike. It climbs, descends, it does everything. It gravels, it does everything. However, this was essentially a time trial in road position without riding, because you're not supposed to use aero bars in brevets, because you can't use them at PBP, which is, these brevets, 200K, 300K, 400K, 600K qualify you to do the 1200K, 750 miles, Paris-Brest, Paris, PBP, and you're not supposed to use aero bars. So, like everything else that I do, you train the way you're going to race. You don't ride a bike with aero bars, right? But this was basically a time trial for 300K. It's very little climbing. So I rode my XR4 with the 60 wheels because that was an aero equipment, and then my clothing was an road aero helmet and a skin suit from Nellini, which I love their fabrics, the Italian company. They still make their stuff in Italy. So we had the skin suit. Now, it was cold in the morning, but I still went without a base layer. I saw the temp range going into the low 60s. I figured I'm going to be fine. And then I had the Pearl Izumi arm warmers and knee warmers that I've also done a video on here. Whenever I do videos, this is the stuff I personally use, and that's why I recommend it to you folks. I didn't want to actually wear warmers because I did not want to be overheating at some point in the day. So just those sun coolers in black, though, just because the white ones get so dirty, so I just wear the black ones. Unless it's going to be 90 plus degrees, then I'll wear the white ones. Okay, let's talk about nutrition. My nutrition was absolutely perfect. I've mentioned in other videos, I use this full meal deal powder, and then I also use some Tailwind unflavored because I would rather use the Carbo Pro, but it's hard. You can't order it. It's still out of stock, so I cannot order it, so I can't refill my stock. The unflavored Tailwind had some electrolyte, sodium electrolytes, and a few other little minor quantities, and that boosted the calorie count. So I had 1,200 calories per bottle. And I did go with the taller bottles. One was 38 ounces and the other one is like, I think 34 ounces. And this is important. As I said, I'll keep talking about how important these larger bottles were. I also, I've done a video about this as well. The little sandwiches. It's funny. If you listen to Trainer Road and some of these other channels, they're like, oh, no. Don't eat solid food, or don't eat any protein, don't eat solid food, or oh my God, a ham sandwich. Yeah, dude, you're going out for hundreds of miles. You eat that stuff. And you got to train your gut to handle just about anything. This is an important thing. I see this with triathletes all the time. They can only drink this. They can only have this powder. No, stop the nonsense. Your stomach, train your stomach to take in anything to get you down the road. You have to be able, I tell people I'm like a flux capacitor on the Back to the Future DeLorean. I can just about eat anything on the bike, and you need to train yourself to do that. Don't lock yourself into one nutrition product only, or I only can have, PB&Js or this. No, if you need a Snickers bar, you eat a Snickers bar. If you get, in my case, I love gummy bears, right? And if the power output, you're looking at your power meter, you're looking at your screen, if everything's still what you expect it to be, keep eating it. Keep yourself fueled. Do not make fueling complicated. Especially if you're a Brevet rider, you're going to have to pull in, you're going to have to pull into a gas station somewhere and eat something in the middle of the night on your 400K, which is 252 miles, or on your 600K, which is over 375 miles. At some point, you're going to run out of product. Or are you carrying all of that? You're going to have to buy something along the way. So you have to train your body to eat just about anything. If you go to an event, you need to be able to eat whatever's provided at that table. Now, having said that, on shorter things like double centuries, I have one on Saturday, the 18th, I carry all my own powder, and then all I need is water at the aid stations. I rarely eat anything there because it's only 200 miles. So I don't eat on a 200 miler if I'm going, fairly hard. Okay, so that's the sandwiches, the gels, and then, whatever else. But I didn't need anything from the stores except water. Now, let's get into the stores thing. One of the things that was really frustrating about following the route on my Wahoo was that it kept giving you directions to a store. And I need to find some collapsible readers or something that I can carry with me, because I couldn't read the Wahoo as well. And I'm not going to memorize 187 miles of checkpoints and stuff. It's just, I've got other things to worry about. So it would take you off of the road, and then, oh God, that was just for a check, for a control, or for fuel or bathrooms. I don't need any of that stuff. We're only 30 miles in, or 40 miles in, 70 miles in. So our only stop of the day to refuel was at 160 miles. And we were 8+ hours into the day, like 8.5 hours into the day. And so when I post rides on Strava and people say, why do you do these no rides? Why don't you stop to pee? I don't understand the logic behind that. Well, first of all, if you're not drinking much, you don't have to pee a lot. But train the way you're going to race. If my power output is still good, why do I need to pull in for anything? If I've got enough nutrition on board, why do I need to pull in? Time off the bike. You cannot spend time off the bike because you can't make it up. Okay. I mentioned that the tall bottles came in handy. Now, here's why. We were moving along the course pretty well. Got some flats, so I'm going to deal with that in a minute. So now we're trying to make up time, or I'm trying to make up time because I'm having flats. And I'm really, really, really pushing these ladies to keep going. And that's why we didn't stop until mile 160. Lori was completely out of fluids. Barbara was out of fluids. 8.5 hours. And I still had fluids. So I was giving everyone a bump off of my bottles. I was giving gels out. I was just keeping everyone moving. So let's go through a quick breakdown of what I had and what my math was. So I calculated 12 hours of ride of total time. Came in at 11:16, so it kind of was close. 12 hours at either 300 or 350 calories per hour had me at either 3,600 calories or 4,200 calories. So I said, okay, I'm going to go with the high number of 350 per hour of 12 hours, 4,200 calories. And then this is the breakdown. I had 2,400 in my bottles. I had 800 in sandwiches, so 4 sandwiches. I had 4 gels, 150 per gel. That's 600 calories. And then I had 2 bars, 200 each, so 400 calories. All that added up to 4,200. Now, here's another tip for you. Carry more nutrition than you think you'll ever need. You may either have to give some of your nutrition to one of your teammates. You may miscalculate your time on the course. But also, you're going to drop stuff. And that's what happened. Hit a pothole and boom, lost 200 calories because the bar fell out out of my... I went with this little top tube bag, which I normally don't ride with one, but I needed to carry my dart, and I needed it to be... I'm sorry, not my dart, my Dynaplug, and I needed it to be handy. So I had it in this bag in a pocket that's here on the side. So even though I had stuff in there, I could reach right in for the Dynaplug. But I had that because my pockets were full and I just wanted to be able to access my Dynaplug. But I had gels in there and then I had bars in there. And one of the times I hit a pothole, boom, the thing went flying. I'm not turning around for it, going forward. So that's why you either have to give nutrition to someone else, you may miscalculate your time on course, or you're going to lose stuff. You're going to pull your bar or gel out of your pocket, something else is going to fall out as well. So just take more nutrition than you think you need. All right, so let's talk about the things that worked well. Number one, the training I thought was on point. Like I said, I felt confident about this event. Mentally, physically. The bike was great, nutrition was great, and the clothing was the perfect choice. I had Asso's aero booties over my shoes as well. When we look at my power data, Here's a quick teaser. I spent over 7 hours in zone 1 because it's so important to draft behind some wheels and keep your energy management is one of the most important things on an ultra. Okay, these burning of matches and all this other sprinting you don't do that nonsense. Now, you do have to burn some matches to get in the initial break or the selection, first or second selection, but at that point, you're still trying to conserve as much energy as possible. So let's talk about that, and then I'll talk more about it on my power analysis. 51 starters. The initial selection was about 15, then 14, then one guy's hydration stuff on the back came apart, and then another guy went to drink, and it was cold, so the bottle must have slipped out of his hand. So he's off, so you just kept whittling this down. And eventually, it was 12, and then 10 or 8, and then we were down to about 5. And it was the guy who came in first, Marco, Brooke, a friend of mine, and then Barbara, Lori, and myself. So us 5. And once the flatting started, then everyone just kind of took off and left us behind. So energy conservation, energy management. There were times when I went a lot harder than I wanted to, but it's an investment. You cannot think of it as an expense. It's an investment. If you invest that energy to get into that move or into that next selection as it splits up again, and you're still in the wheels, that's an investment. It's worth it because it now pays interest to you as you're rolling down a road with a good, steady 5, 6, 7 riders. Everyone takes a poll, and you get a chance to sit on for 3 or 4 riders until it's your turn again. So sometimes you have to spend or invest, think of it as an investment, energy to stay in the wheels, and it pays off. It does. It really, really pays off later. Okay, so there's that. Let's get into the bad. Once again, we're on tubeless. Tire technology, rolling resistance, everything is supposed to be so awesome. And so I went with Silca sealant. It's supposed to be, pretty much the ultimate, right? Silca sealant, 28 tires, Continental STR, 5000 STR, lower pressure, right? I was at about 65 on a 28 tire. I weigh about 150, so 28 tire, 65. My rim says no more than 70, so I was below that. Conflicting data because the Silca site, it's much higher than that. But the head site is down to like 58 PSI. And I was like right around 65, 68 PSI. All right. First flat was a sidewall puncture at about mile 65. Pulled out the Dyna plug, popped it in there, put some CO2 in, got down the road. It was less than 4 minutes. And that seemed to, I guess, hold. So from about mile 65, because now everyone's up the road, from 65 to 76, we chased, and we caught the lead group again at a stop that they had made. And when we stopped there, I realized my tire was low, so I tried to air it up slowly to see if it would seat or seal better than with the CO2. And it seemed to hold, so we get back on the road, and at almost exactly at 100 miles, I'm pulling over because now I got to put a tube in. And all I keep thinking to myself is, everybody says this stuff is so awesome, and in 3 years, whatever, I've never had to put a tube in. I've been riding tubeless for 7 years. I've never had to put a tube in. I don't know what to tell you, man, but it just still doesn't freaking work. And I was really frustrated because we've trained really hard, and I'm dragging my team down. I'm dragging Barbara and Lori down with my flats. So we put a tube in, we get down the road. Then Lori gets a flat. She's also on tubeless. She's 115, 20 pounds, whatever. And she's running really low pressures as well. Doesn't seal for her. So we put a tube in her tire. When we're sitting there fixing it, a gentleman named Matt pulls up and he says, oh, I got a flat too. And so he's doing a flat repair. At mile 112, pull over again because I have another flat. And he catches us, Matt, pulls over again and says, you're not going to believe this, but I'm flat too. And I'm like, oh my God. So he's out of CO2s and he's out of tubes. I have a mini pump and we didn't want to use any more CO2s. Barbara gives up one of her tubes and I take over to replace his flat. And by the way, he's on gator skins. So, you know, for those that are like, oh yeah, you should be riding gator skins. That didn't help him either. And we get down the road again. And at mile 130, we have now integrated into the Tour de Palm Springs folks, which is normally what I would do. The Tour de Palm Springs, 100 miler on that same kind of flattish type course. Fun, thousands, not hundreds, thousands of riders on the course. And if you get dropped, you pick up the next train that's coming by. And so we integrate into this course. I see them coming, and then all of a sudden I'm flat again. So Matt, bless his soul, we're running out of stuff. I mean, how much stuff do you bring? Because we did all these training rides and I didn't get any flats. Anyway, he buys some tubes and CO2 from the VeloFix vehicle. And thank you, Matt. And we get back on the road. And then, so that was mile 130. Then we pull in to a store at mile 1, the very first stop that we made for the day for fluids and food, at mile 160. And now this next 28 miles, 27 plus miles, 159, 28 miles, is into a headwind over 20 miles per hour, just steady. And Lori gets a flat 13 miles from the finish. Now, here's the thing. Changing a flat for me is literally 3 minutes. I mean, on the long end, 5. But when you're running out of supplies, every flat and every repair is like, you're just being so careful. And so you check the tire, then you turn it inside out, then you hand it to another person, get another set of eyes and another set of hands on it to check. Are we missing a wire? Are we missing a goat head? Why can't I see what this? So now our stops are getting longer and longer because of these flat repairs. When in a controlled environment, it's 3 to 5 minutes or less to change a flat tire. Anyway, we finally get in. We get in before sunset. So everything was perfect except these flats. Now, I'll tell you, it's just a very frustrating thing because everyone says that tubeless is so awesome. But Still not seeing it. So what am I doing? We have a 200 miler on Saturday. Oh, and by the way, the tires were brand new. That was the very first ride for those tires, for those Continental 5000 STRs. The tubeless, the sealant was new as well. And there's a photo, I'll see if I can find it. I mean, there's a clump of this Silca sealant. I mean, it's about as long as a cigar, as fat as one too. How did that all clump up in there? That's just ridiculous. But yeah, I'm just gonna have to go back to tubes. It's just not working for me. Low pressures, big volume tires, and it still doesn't work. As far as that tire, I put a patch on the sidewall because it was a sidewall cut. I put a patch on it on the inside, a tubeless patch. You know, this guy here. And once I aired it up, it blew through so it's got a tire boot in there and it's got a tube. And that's that. So yeah, still not perfected. Still not perfected. Okay. Please stay tuned for the power analysis. Pacing was perfect for me, and it worked really, really well to have my my crew trading pulls with me. The three of us ended up riding alone from mile 100 on. Matt kind of took a few pulls here and there, but basically we rode alone, or the three of us rode together and alone from the rest of the folks. And that time off the bike repairing flats cost us from coming in much earlier. But we know our fitness is there. We know that we are prepared for the 18th 200 miler on the 18th. Okay, well, that's all for today. Please like and subscribe. We'll see you up the road.